everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of Read Right to Left. A little bit belated this, we completely missed the month, but we're doing it anyway. A double episode month for you lovely listeners, just for you, not because scheduling was extremely problematic this last month. This month we are doing a creator spotlight, and I in a way I feel like this particular episode is maybe a little bit cursed, because we did try to do this episode earlier in the year, didn't work out.
Last year even.
Did try to do this episode. Did try to do it again for the July episode, which ostensibly this is what it is, but it is now early August.
Yep.
So whether or not that's an indication of things to come, I don't know. But we're here, we are happy, we are talking about the very popular, somewhat divisive, Tatsuki Fujimoto.
Indeed.
Mangaka of very, very popular series, Chainsaw Man. We'll talk a little bit about Chainsaw Man, but we will be focusing more on his other works. Namely because Ray didn't really read any Chainsaw Man. I am very behind on Chainsaw Man. It's also very long and deserves its own
we really
dedicated episode.
Kind of just decided that that's going on the series spotlight list. It'll do better there. We'll be able to go into more depth. And it's very long, so that kind of makes it more fitting for our series spotlight series.
So if you're wanting to hear our thoughts specifically about Chainsaw Man, I will talk a little bit about it, but this will be more so focused on Fujimoto's one-shots as well as his longer title, Fire Punch. But in saying that, there is lots to talk about, because we have a lot of Fujimoto's works in English available in various iterations in print, but also pretty much across the board available on the Shonen Jump app. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, they're missing the second half of his Before Chainsaw Man anthology, but other than that, I think everything is there.
Lots of Fujimoto to enjoy, and lots of ways to read it. Again, this is also a creator that I think is probably available in a lot of libraries because he's very popular. Yeah. So if you are not wanting to invest in the print editions yourself, or if you're not wanting to, or if you don't find the value of having the Shonen Jump app itself, then I'm sure you can track copies down.
Yep.
As someone who's just recently read most of Fujimoto's work, Ray, how did you feel going into this marathon?
Well, I already knew that I really enjoyed Look Back, which I reread for this. And I knew that from our Shonen Jump app spotlight episode that I really enjoyed the first 10 or so chapters of both Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man. I also know that G really loves Tatsuki Fujimoto's work, and that our tastes are heavily overlapping in manga. So I went in with high expectations. I found all of his work is very interesting, and I think we'll get good discussion out of each of the pieces. I really, really enjoyed everything I read except Fire Punch. I had very mixed feelings about Fire Punch. So, yep. Yeah.
I feel that's a very fair assessment, and I I think especially, like, I remember, I feel so old saying this, but like back in the day when Fire Punch was the only Fujimoto work available in English, and it has some very confronting aspects to it, even from like chapter 1.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that was like relegated to the, oh, you have to be like an edgy dude bro to enjoy the series, and therefore got disregarded by a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I don't think Fire Punch is Fujimoto's best work. I find it interesting is the best word for it, right? Like, all of his stuff is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Fire Punch is the perfect work. I think going into it, when I originally did, which was via the Shonen Jump app or website, I think it's just relegated to the website, with such low expectations, made me appreciate it more for what it was doing and what people weren't talking about it doing, comparatively to being like,
oh, this is just so edgy and like meaningless shock jock stuff. I do think there's meaningless shock jock stuff in it.
Absolutely.
That's Fujimoto in general. I mean, obviously it's like more extreme by degrees, but than even something like Chainsaw Man. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting work. Like, it's definitely like saying things. I just don't know if all the things that it's saying came together super coherently at times. And I guess I did find the atmosphere of it oppressive by the end, just because I was kind of marathoning the series. Because I'm not someone, obviously, I mean, you know me, like, I don't really care about most types of extreme content.
Yeah.
We here at Read Right to Left are proud Matic enjoyers, so there's not a lot that you can throw at me where I'll be like, oh my god, good heavens. But
what will the children think? Oh my god.
So it wasn't like that it was dealing with things like, cannibalism or torture or sex slavery or incest. It was just that it kind of never stops. And it doesn't... I think that it was attempting to serve a purpose, but I don't know if that purpose got successfully reached. If that makes sense.
No, I would agree with that. I think that it's reflective of being an early work, and we can talk a little bit about the short stories as well. Not for Fire Punch, but from Fujimoto. And Fire Punch, from my perspective, you can see Fujimoto is very, very open and obvious about the things that he likes to write about and the things that he enjoys. He's a big film lover, just loves schlocky action, like D-movie kind of monster movies. It's a lot of fun, but I don't think that people, or when people do see the kind of reactive violence, there's a over the topness to a lot of Fujimoto's works, or all of Fujimoto's works. Let's be frank. There's a lot of
gleeful excessiveness,
gross and silly and dumb, and it's hard to take some of it seriously, because even though it's dealing with like quote unquote serious issues like sex slavery, like just over the top violence,
religion,
like cannibalism, religion, all of these things, and it can be easy to dismiss, as we've talked about, like just very shallow. Oh my god, like, how will we upset the churchgoers today, right? Like, how will we upset the normies? And to Ray's point, absolutely, there is elements of that. And I would argue Chainsaw Man is similar. And I don't think I think it takes a little while. Like, I always say, to be able to wade through the quote-unquote anime bullshit until you get to the crux of what is trying to be said. Again, whether or not that's successful is always a different discussion, but I do think that there is a genuine attempt to say something, even in Fire Punch, where it is about, like, a cannibalistic post-world snowball Earth kind of dystopia, wherein our main character is always on fire, so we'll never stop hurting. Yeah. And is in love with his sister, and like all of these things.
Yeah, and has sex with his sister. Yeah. Who's not his sister, but is his sister.
And then the takedown of what heroism is, and, you know, idolatry. There is actually, like, genuine attempt at having a more nuanced discussion. And I do think that for all of the schlock and all of the, you know, over-the-top craziness, that Fujimoto does care about shit. And you just have to kind of be able to quote-unquote survive all of the early... If you're someone who can stomach all of the early silly, dumb stuff, shocking stuff, then the payoff for some of that is very, like, I do think it's quite effective. And I know for me, when Fire Punch, like, that switch really, really hit for me, or was obvious, was when one of the characters is talking to Fire Punch, this main character, about ostensibly being trans, but not being able to live the life that they're able to because they have this miraculous gift of healing. And that someone whose gifts, quote unquote, kind of feed into their self-image would never be able to understand someone struggling and living a reality where they'd never be able to live as the person they want to be and able to change their self-image. That's such an uncommon message, I think, especially for this kind of, oh yeah, we've got a guy on fire punching people to death and this horrible world. Like, I feel like the main audience who was reading this, both in the West and Japan, that's, like, not a topic that they were expecting to get in this sort of series. And I think it is done with enough, like, genuine emotion to it and understanding, or distraught, that even someone who, like, has no interest and no idea about, like, gay rights or the LGBT experience or trans issues would be like, oh, that kind of makes sense, and I understand why this is something that they're struggling with, in a way that's, like, not a queer educator, like, sitting down and explaining and talking about their life's purpose and issues. So I think in a way it kind of bridges those things for me, that was, like, unexpected to come from this series. I wasn't expecting the nuance. I also find that Fire Punch, as well as Chainsaw Man, as well as a lot of his works, you can so obviously see there's a cinematic quality to it. Oh, yeah. Like, you could never make this into a movie, but But it would be so easy to make it into a movie just from the paneling. And that sort of artistry, which is actually quite hard to pull off in a comic, that really, like, impressed me a lot. Especially, again, because I went into Fire Punch only ever hearing people, like, talk about how it was so edgy and, like, oh my god, you had to be made of some tough stuff to get through it because it's talking about cannibalism. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm just tougher than some of these guys out here. But I wasn't that, thrown by any of those topics.
I think the moment for me, definitely that character sort of sharing about his gender identity stuck out to me. Although I was then immediately annoyed because he, like, shared that, like, super vulnerable aspect of himself and then died for the rest of the series. So I was like,
yeah.
For me, it was after Fire Punch, Agni goes and, like, has this, huge, like, revelation within himself that, like, oh, I want to free all these slaves in this. I came here to get vengeance on this one dude who, like, set me on fire and killed my sister and everything. Came to, like, the Hunger Games capital city, right? Like, where all the elites are living. And it's obviously run on, people juice. Like, we know the genre.
Yeah.
I just looked up to confirm. Everything falls into place when you look up that Fire Punch began its run in 2016 and Mad Max Fury Road came out in 2015.
And Fury Road is on Fujimoto's list of, like, must-watch films of all time. So you know he's a fan.
Oh yeah. Well, we get the wives as, like, characters later in this series, which I just laughed at that point. But no, this is pretty early in the series. Agni is like, the only thing that keeps me going, keeps me burning on, is that I'm gonna get vengeance against this guy that I hate. And he goes to the creepy capital city with all the rich people, and he meets the guy he wants to get vengeance on. It's, like, just this normal guy who, like, has, like, immediately breaks down in tears and begs for his life because he's got other people in his life now that he's like, please just, like, let me live so I can take care of them. And he's like, I feel so bad for what I did to you, but I can't die. Just kind of sniveling on the ground, really. He's this, like, essentially ex-war criminal who has since kind of, like, learned and moved on a little bit. He was very much deep in the sauce, the cult sauce, when he was doing all that stuff. And he's sort of been deprogramming ever since. And it's just really interesting. But that's not the thing that was interesting. But the thing that got me was Agni finding, these cells full of slaves. And being like, I think I've been living for vengeance all this time, but I actually think I want to save all these slaves. And he, has this big damn hero moment where he rescues them, and he tears down, like, the entire city in the process.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to be like, well, okay, you got your hero moment here, but at what cost? Like, was all of this collateral damage necessary? You just razed a city to the ground. And you didn't have to. Like, there's all these bad people who have come to fight you, sure. But there's also just, like, normal fuckos living in those buildings.
Yeah. There's, like, children and just people who've never done anything.
Yeah. So, and I thought that was interesting. I was like, that's, usually you'd have, like, him realizing, like, I'm not going to live for vengeance. I'm going to live to help people. And then he would help the people who need helping, and that would be it. But in this case, it's like, they're really... It's hard to find a right answer, because no matter what you do, like, some people are going to be just completely eviscerated. It's almost... His existence in itself ends up being sort of unholy throughout the series, which kind of keeps going back and forth on, like, what the existence of Fire Punch even means. Which is where I'm like, the series is interesting, but it's so flawed. Yeah. It never takes a firm stance on, like, what Agni's existence means. It's kind of, I think, trying to do too much with his character. It's like trying to be a commentary on, like, you know, these big overpowered, like, superheroes. It's trying to be, like, a deconstruction of superheroes. It's trying to be, like, a Mad Max movie where these women are trying to liberate themselves. It's trying to be, like, you know, this commentary on vengeance. It's trying to be this commentary on religion and idolatry and putting people on pedestals. It's also trying to be just this really schlock-jock, like, action movie where a bunch of superpowered, like, weirdos keep, like, punching each other really hard. And it's also trying to be, like, this meta-commentary on the movies. And I just think it's doing too much. It gets a little lost in the sauce. Also, there's, like, a tree person. There's, like, climate anxiety stuff going on here, too. I feel like somebody's seen Snowpiercer.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And this is, again, I don't know whether it's a reflection of it being his first, like, long-form work, you know, or if it's just having the opportunity to, or just, not knowing how to work with wanting to do too much and not knowing how to pare it down or tie all of those elements together completely. I've said it before, like, I do like Fire Punch. I find it a very interesting work, but it's certainly not, like, it's not one you can recommend willy-nilly to people, because not everyone is like you and me, right? Not everyone is going to be just chill with the cannibalism. But I do think, for me, as said, when I first read it, it was more than what I expected, and it gave me an appreciation for what Fujimoto was trying to say. And then when I saw those elements in a more concise or more fully formed way in his later works, Chainsaw Man, obviously, but also his short stories, it showed that this wasn't just like he happily stumbled onto some nuance and some interesting ideas. It was more like, well, he probably was always wanting to say similar things or have meaningful messages in his, shock series. And it wasn't just like he accidentally stumbled into a good thing just because he was pulling from so many different ideas and copying the things that he enjoyed. Even as the resident Fujimoto enjoyer of the podcast, I would say that, like, if you enjoy Chainsaw Man, you don't have to go back and read Fire Punch. There's not a necessity. It's maybe interesting in, like, historical context to the creator. But if you do find Fire Punch interesting or good, or however you want to quantify that, you should definitely read his other works, because they are more mature insofar as like the process and thought behind it and tying those ideas together.
It is like, it's interesting, like, in context, like, with I think the connection between Fire Punch and like Chainsaw Man is incredibly obvious.
Yes.
But the connection with something like Look Back or Goodbye Eri is not as apparent from the start. And I feel like reading Fire Punch first, because it was the first thing that I read for this podcast. Well, I'd read Look Back before, but the last time I read it was like a year ago. So I reread it after finishing Fire Punch. But having started with Fire Punch, I feel like it gave me sort of an interesting context, because it really does just have every thought that Fujimoto, I think, has ever had. And only about, like, maybe 15% of them make sense. But, but it's like all of these ideas that he has in his head, all of these like different influences that he wears on his sleeve, that like it's interesting having that context going into some stuff that's like a little bit more grounded, a little bit less like I wanted to make a B movie. So obviously like Goodbye Eri has some like fantasy elements, but Look Back doesn't really. It has some funky timelines, which Fire Punch is like nothing if not funky timeline stuff, so I had no idea what was going on with the passage of time like after like volume 2. I think the world ended about 6 times.
Yeah.
There's like 2 different people trees. It's yeah, sure was something. It makes me wonder, like, I want to spend a day in his head, like, in his brain. I want to see how he understands, like, time. Because it feels like...
Fujimoto
yeah.
is an interesting... Like, I feel like he'd just be an interesting guy to have a drink with.
Yeah.
And just spend some time with, because... There's a lot going on.
Oh, bro, you'd walk away from that conversation with a list of movies to watch, man.
Movies, TV shows, anime. I've seen the short list, and as you know, there's some pretty impeccable taste there, but also just some absolute schlock, which is also maybe indicative of impeccable taste. So.
For sure. Yeah, you know, we never actually said what Fire Punch is about.
I mean, isn't that kind of just half the enjoyment of it? It just going into it, maybe not expecting. It's a post-apocalyptic, just crazy romp with people who have superpowers, but just because they have superpowers doesn't mean that they're any good for you.
So, if Snowpiercer met Mad Max Fury Road and all the characters were from The Watchmen...
That's what this series is. And, like, yes, Chapter 1... Well, not just Chapter 1, but... There's cannibalism, as mentioned. There's incest. There's
bestiality.
Sex slavery, bestiality.
People,
extreme, excessive violence.
There's like people like getting tied up to machines to power the city.
There's people getting limbs cut off and spines removed and all sort. Like, it's just. It's one of those things. It's like you're either along for the ride or you're not, right? You can't be... If you're precious about that sort of stuff, I don't recommend this series. If you don't mind that kind of over-the-top gratuitous schlock, or are indifferent to it. It's not a perfect series. It's also not the series that, like, will fucking change your whole life for the worst, right? Like, it's not... I don't think it's one of those series that will scar you forever and, you know, you'll be stuck thinking about it for the rest of your life. It's not, like... Maybe I'm just cynical and jaded, but, like, it's fine. And it's an interesting piece to the larger puzzle to what Fujimoto is, and if you are someone who enjoys his other work, it's worth looking at. It's also, I think, a pretty good indication of, like, Fujimoto in his rawest form, where he doesn't have maybe the editorial guidance to, you know, make it less of a XXX rated seedy motel
fever dream
cable movie. Yeah.
Which I love a good fever dream, but this one didn't really come together for me. But the other stuff I read was great. So we can talk, I guess, a little bit about Look Back. We have spoken about this one at length in our Shonen Jump app episode, and I believe one of our year-end wrap-ups as well. I think that was before I had read it, but you talk a lot about it. So I don't know that we need to talk for too long about this one, but it is a masterpiece.
Absolutely. And I hate to, like, stop to not actually talk about the works themselves, but, like, contextually, insofar as, like, the body of Fujimoto's work, this is the one that got people to, like, actually pay attention, because Fire Punch, only, like, 22-year-old guys were reading it, and telling everyone, like, oh my god, you have to be, like, a fucking hard guy to even want to look at this. And then Chainsaw Man was out and popular in Jump, but also, like, just that bit too weird for the normal Jump folks. So, like, people are like, oh man, it's good, but, like, man, this guy's fucking demented, right? And then,
I mean, true.
And also, like, again, true, but also, again, like, I don't necessarily know that this is me casting unkind aspersions on manga readers, but, like, average Jump fan isn't necessarily going to be looking for the nuance that is in a lot of these things, including Chainsaw Man. So, like, it's all about the fights and not about the immensely well done found family reflections on vengeance style of story. Normally they're just like, oh man, this guy has a chainsaw for a head and he's riding a shark, and then there's just things blowing up. So a lot of, like, normies or non-Jump fans were like, that sounds strange. I don't know that I would want to read that. But Look Back was this, and as a one-shot especially, it was a singular piece that was like, no, this person actually has a really strong understanding of the space that they occupy in this artistic world, and they have the talent to be able to communicate that really effectively. And it's such a beautiful reflection on the artistic process and the artist's relationship with art that is done in 150 pages, wherein some people can't even manage to fully capture that feeling in 10 volumes, right?
Yeah, well,
So,
all that, but also it's such a beautiful, beautiful portrait of a friendship. Like, one of the best I've seen in manga. And it's like, again, such a short piece, but it really captures, like, the relationship between these two women.
yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think that's also something that Fujimoto doesn't necessarily get enough credit for, is how he writes relationships between characters, just kind of full stop.
Mm-hmm.
There's a realness to these interactions that reflect someone who, like, understands people and not, like, actually knows how humans, or at least knows how to show how, quote unquote, like, normal people interact, which is unfortunately a little bit of a rarity in a medium as poisoned as anime and manga, where everyone is just relying on tropes of, like, every other previous series, and nobody acts like a normal human being. So,
Which, I mean, has its own charms.
Oh, sure. Like, believe me, I talked a lot of shit about manga, but I still am here reading it and enjoying it. So it's not like I'm any better. And I think this, what you just said, actually ties really well to one of the questions that we've gotten from Nietzsche, or at Nietzsche Fix, wherein they say, Fujimoto often gets praised for the way he writes women in his stories. The emotional space given to each character really grounds them and makes them feel like actual people. Is there a particular female character from any of his works that stood out to you? And a secondary question also, are you both looking forward to the Look Back adaptation? Because it is getting a anime film later this year.
I can't wait.
I'm so looking forward to it. Oh my gosh.
As for the women in Fujimoto's stuff, yeah, certainly he has some really good female characters. Look Back, the characters are incredible. I really like Eri from Goodbye Eri. Some of the female characters who show up in his one-shots. My thing is, and it shows up the most egregiously out of the things that I read in Fire Punch. But he's got a couple of types. He likes a woman who is the cool girl. He's really into the cool girl. Like Gone Girl style. Like, just one of the boys. She just wants to sit and, on the recliner with some Cheetos and, watch the worst movie you've ever seen. And I would regrettably include the character who talks about being trans in Fire Punch. In that, I thought it was mostly because he fucking died, like, right after, so we never got to see any further development from him. It's just, like, him being this, like cool girl with a camera, movie making, quoting Star Wars all the time, quote unquote girl. And then he says that, and then he just, like, dies. It's like, all right. But, the other type that Fujimoto seems to really like exploring is the sort of feral, naked girl. Born Sexy Yesterday, Fifth Element ass, like, infant child, with boobies. And that is basically Judah in Fire Punch, and it pissed me off from the second she showed up to the second she turned into a fucking tree. I was like, oh my god, okay, I guess we're doing this now. And, yeah. And I mean, the 10 chapters or so that I've read of Chainsaw Man, it's like, those are still, like, his types, right? Power's like this feral girl, Makima's like this, you know, cool, like, step on me mommy, type of, like, villainess. And they're so Manic Pixie Dream Girl adjacent that I think it kept, like, really just, like, irritating me. Especially because I read so much of his stuff in such quick succession. I was just seeing the same characters showing up over and over. And I was like, I get it. This is who you want to date or maybe be. But it's like... And I'm sure that the women in Chainsaw Man end up, like... I mean, they already were written way better than, like, the women in Fire Punch ever were, just from the 10 chapters I read. It's just, like, me clocking that it's, like, those types again. That I'm like, he has a type. I don't know. So I'm like, yes, his women are... compared to some of the stuff in Shonen Jump, even in the year of our Lord, 2024, like, miles better. But I also think that it kind of runs into the same issues, I guess, that other series that are from Shonen Jump that people like, not even Shonen Jump, just like mainstream shonen stuff. Because I do kind of feel this way about something like Full Metal Alchemist as well, that, like, they get sort of put on this pedestal as these amazing, like, quote-unquote feminist works. I don't like calling works feminist unless they actively are about feminist issues. But, you know, people be like, it's a paragon of, like, feminism to some of these shonen series that just have female characters who aren't god fucking awful. So it's like, it kind of didn't quite clear the bar for me, I guess. But, you know, it's still, like, on the higher end of, like, Shonen Jump stuff for its female characters. And look back, I have no issues with.
I think, I think also, like, to your point of, like, the sexy baby / like, cool girl, one of the guys, character tropes, which I agree with. I do think that those are sort of his staples that he returns to. But I do also think that there's a lot of, like, maybe appreciation for what I call the quote-unquote girl failure, right? Which ties into the sexy baby stuff, but also is just like, you've got a girl and she just is fucking bad at life. She's trying her hardest. And it's not because she's a baby and was born yesterday and is sexy, but, like, because just the world is shit and things aren't fair, and sometimes, you know, it's just easier to be a bit of a girl failure and not have to deal with having to be, like, the cool, sexy, perfect girl. Like, Makima is a different kettle of fish altogether, but I would say that majority, if not all, of the other female characters, including Power in Chainsaw Man, fall into this, like, man, we're just trying our best. We don't know how to survive this. Like, I'm just trying to get to the next day. And I'm not, like, there's a realness to that. I think that also people, especially women, including adult women, like, appreciate that they're not just, like, a cool, sexy, perfect at everything, but also, like, inept when it matters. Like, a lot of his female characters are good at in the moment, or good at fighting, or good at what they need to be doing. But, like, outside of that, their personal life is shit. They just, like, make all the worst mistakes. And you're like, man, that's me. I can understand that. There's no need for perfection, which especially in like Shonen Jump, when you see a lot of these female or girl or women characters, they either have to be untouchable perfect, right? Or they are that perfect, like, beautiful whatever, but also don't contribute anything to the story, or are inconsequential generally to the story.
Or they're like, you know, hyper feminines, but super approachable, like Girl Next Door.
Yeah, exactly. And like, she's just so comforting, and that's the girl you want to marry, because what a wonderful mother she'd make. So there's none of those characters, which isn't like a resounding endorsement of like, yes, this is the truly greatest feminist work. But I think it's, again, like a reflection of what I say, regardless of gender for the characters in Fujimoto's works. I think there's always this aspect of like people who make what are ostensibly like quote unquote bad decisions. They're not like good people in the moral sense, but they're doing what they need to survive the terrible situations they're in, because no world that Fujimoto has created is easy to be living in. They're always just the worst setting. Like, you don't want to end up there. This is not a good time for anyone. And so there's an understanding that, like, they might not be doing what's morally right or what you would do in that situation, but you can understand, like, why they're doing it. And that's, like, not a gendered thing, because male characters can get away with that shit all of the time. In any manga, all of the time, no problem. Everyone will have the empathy for them and be like, oh, well, it might not be right, but he did it for the right reasons. And you're like, well, no, sometimes it's not for the right reasons. Maybe it's just because they're selfish and terrible. And I think that's just more of a blanket statement for characters regardless of gender for Fujimoto, wherein they don't have to be quote-unquote good people or quote-unquote doing the right thing, but they're ostensibly living in a nightmare. So you can understand that these are just probably, when you look at it contextually, normal people. They're not doing good things that fall under modern day 2024 standards. Or also sometimes it's just reflective of the maturity of the character. This is something we hear discussed a lot about, like Denji, right? It's like, oh my god, he's so perverted. All he ever thinks about is sex. It's like, yeah, well, he's a 16-year-old
in a state of arrested development, understandably.
Exactly. Understandably, he's never felt like he's never had any sort of affection or healthy love from anyone in his entire life. Also, he's 16. Let the poor guy just want to touch a boob. That's not the worst thing a 16-year-old has ever wanted in their life. You know, it's fine. It's normal and fine. So, and in the same way, like, there's female characters who fall under that kind of idea of they're not doing the right thing. They're not doing the healthy, smart thing. But they're also, like, they weren't raised in an environment that was conducive to that. Of course they're doing dumb shit and making the worst mistakes. And, like, you can say, well, that wasn't very, you know, they're not good role models. I don't think any of the characters are meant to be role models.
No.
And maybe that's
you're
issue
touching
in
on
Shonen Jump. But
you're touching on something I did want to say about Fire Punch that I did appreciate, that is, as you're saying, like, true across all the works that I read. I still don't want to speak on Chainsaw Man, having not read it. Yeah, it is just that aspect of, like, these characters are doing the best that they can. You know, Agni, for all of his, like, being extremely morally, emotionally, spiritually confused throughout the whole thing, at any given moment is just doing his best. Like he's trying to do the best he can. The movie director character, I'm very sorry that I can't remember his name, but he's very like, I really don't care about the carnage around me, but it's because he's been alive for thousands of years and he's seen so much awful shit, including the literal apocalypse. And like, he really just wants to make his little movie. He wants to make his little movie, and then he wants to die because the world is not worth living in. And I don't know, I related to his particular brand of nihilism. It aligned with my particular climate anxiety, or how climate anxiety has affected me. So I think I appreciated that. It's not that he's, like, apathetic, it's that he's just so utterly disillusioned by everything that he's seen. I mean, the world that he lives in is dying, and people are going to die. It's the world has entered another ice age, and he's just like, you know what? All I want to do is finish my movie.
Yeah. And it's also like, and the individual actions of one guy isn't gonna change anything.
No.
I could try really hard, but like, why? No one else is trying hard. There's no point. Might as well just make my little movie and, you know, enjoy what I got.
Maybe I tried really hard for the first 500 years of my life, but, you know, that, just exhaustion with being alive in the here and the now was very relatable. Judah as well, like pre-infantilization. Her whole thing being like, you know, that she essentially started the whole cult, not the fire punch cult, but the cult that the fire worshipping cult that exists at the beginning of the series that the city is built on. You know, she started that cult. She knows it's a hoax. She knows none of it's real. And, like, she does, like, she's so conflicted about it. She really does, like, hate that it's come to this. But she just wants to die, right? Like, so badly. Which makes what happens to her ultimately, like, all the more tragic. But, just like that, her trying to make society run in a world that has become so completely lawless, a world that doesn't make any sense anymore, that is just openly hostile to all human existence. And just being so tired at the end of it all, but not able to end it. I did find compelling. But then she turns into a baby, but, like, she's still sexy.
Yeah.
And also his sister.
Yeah.
And then I was a little over it. But but yeah. Look Back is about a couple of girl fails who are also pretty girl boss. They do both make it as artists, which is, you know, really impressive. But yeah, like we said, it's about just like this. It's about a girl who sort of is complacent in her slightly above average art skills, getting praised by her small little town, for the little four panel comics that she keeps putting in the school newspaper. But then someone else starts contributing to the school newspaper who has, like, way more, like, technically accomplished art. And it's like this hikikomori who doesn't come to school. And that really pisses her off. Makes her quit art for a while. But then, by chance, on graduation day, she has to go, like, deliver some documents to this hikikomori. Because the teacher is like, well, you both contributed to the school newspaper, so she'd probably like it better if you went there instead of me. And so she goes to this shut-ins, like, house and finds out that the girl who, you know, she felt so humiliated by had actually been her fan this whole time. And from there we get the development of their relationship through high school into adulthood as they become sort of a mangaka duo, and they become very popular, creating Tatsuki Fujimoto series.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there, like, long-running series literally called, like, Shark Kick?
Yeah, like Shark. Yeah, absolutely. Shark Kick or Shark...
Yeah, Shark Kick.
Shark Kick.
I feel like it's a very obvious reference to Fire Punch there. But we also get some, like, timeline shenanigans. We get, like, a random murderer showing up, which is a constant in all of these works. Like, what is with the, like, the Deus Ex axe murderer?
I think Fujimoto lives a very interesting life that we just cannot understand, right?
He's like, you know what? Not sure what to do right now. Not sure how to transition between ideas. Axe murderer.
Axe murderer. Better watch out. There's an axe murderer on the loose.
Oh no, another one.
Oh.
But at the end of the day, it really is just the story of these two girls and their relationship with art and creating manga and their relationship with each other. And that's what it comes down to. It's a masterpiece. And yeah, like I said, we have talked extensively about it on other podcasts, so feel free to check those out. I want to talk about Goodbye Eri. This one is also a one-shot, a longer one-shot again, so it's like volume-sized.
Yeah.
But this is about the main male character isn't... So the conceit of the series, I think artistically, is worth bringing up to start with. This series is entirely drawn as essentially like storyboards for a movie. The panels are like big rectangles. There's 2 per page, 3 per page. So it's all just like, you know, one on top of the other. Like it really is just like storyboards. I mean, obviously it's fully drawn in a way that storyboards wouldn't be, but... Or it'd be like looking at a strip of film. It's very cinematic. It is intentionally meant to look like you are looking at a movie, watching a movie. Which makes sense because at the very start of this manga, we are actually just looking at a movie. The main male character... was tasked by his mother with documenting essentially the end of her life. So we get this movie that's just this sort of love letter to her. It's all of these moments that he's sharing with her at home, then in the hospital, and finally on her deathbed, but then right at the end, when she is on her deathbed, about to die, he gets called over to the hospital to be there to witness her last moments. And he's so angry and he's so like hurt and grieving that he can't, like, go inside the building, so he just runs in the opposite direction. And then the building explodes behind him.
And then the crying audience is like, why would you end it like that? That was the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. It turns out that this is a project that he's done as a school project, and shown to the whole school. And I love that, as a teacher, I loved, like, the teachers and the principal being like, you know what, actually, this is my fault for not screening this first. Yeah, so he actually ends up basically becoming, like, a pariah.
Absolutely. Like, everyone in the school hates him because of this
Everyone hates him. Because he made this stupid movie that, like, where it was supposed to be this touching thing about his mom dying, but instead he was so insensitive, he ended it with this stupid explosion. And when people ask him why he did it, he's like, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to include a touch of fantasy.
I just like explosions, guys. I feel like that's a valid enough reason.
But he ends up getting, how is it that he meets Eri for the first time?
I think she's just like, hey, I liked your movie. It was dumb,
yeah.
But I liked it. And he's like, oh.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone who understands my brilliance. Let's hang
She's
out.
like, when I saw that ending, I cried. Like, that movie was awful, but you've got potential. But what you need to do, like, we need to train you. You need to see so many movies. Come to my place. We're watching movies.
It was like a cool viewing movie room in an abandoned building, which would have been hell fun to go to as a kid.
It kind of looks like the Red Letter Media movie viewing room. But yeah, so he goes to Eri's place, kind of like smash cut to like a montage of just countless sessions. Just watching all of Eddie's favorite movies. Across what must be so many afternoons. You guys will not have noticed anything there, but there is actually a whole day in between what was just said about Goodbye Eri.
Whole area change.
So we had to take a bit of a break, but we are back so that I can finish my thoughts about Goodbye Eri, and then we will talk about the short story collection. So, Goodbye Eri. We had gotten to the point of, at this point, they have been friends for quite a long time, and eventually started dating. And then, we get the twist that Eri, has a terminal illness. She's dying, which I feel like is pretty heavily, like, projected up to that point. It's kind of what you expect to happen.
Plus, it's also in comparison to the death of his mother earlier in the piece.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it's sort of a following up on the death of his mother, shadowing it, I guess, foiling it, because Eri also asks him to film her, and so he does, and we get more, like, film sequences throughout this, until finally she passes away. We sort of follow him into adulthood. I should say that he ends up showing this film as well to his school, and successfully does what she wanted him to do from the beginning, which was make a movie good enough that everybody's bawling at the end. And it's his movie of her, and leading up into her final moments, and it does make everyone in the school bawl, and they love this movie.
Because it's in line with what they expected with his first film regarding his mother, and how, you know, this person that you care about dies, and then not coming to terms with that, but ending on that note, right? Ending on a very tragic loss of life, especially in Eri's case, losing her life so young, and so from that, he's never, going into adulthood, he's never really able to recapture that, and it's something he lives with.
Yeah. Should also say that there's sort of a joke that he had with Eri where, you know, he said that he included the explosion in his first movie because he likes to add a touch of fantasy. And they came up with this whole little, like, you know, what if we added a touch of fantasy to your movie, Eri, and you were a vampire? And there's also, I wanted to say that after, still in, like, when he's in school, he talks with essentially the girl who had been Eri's only other real friend. And there's just this really beautiful moment where she says, like, you know, thank you for capturing her that way. That's how I'm always going to be able to see her. And that's how other people are going to be able to see her. And that keeps coming back as a theme that, like, movies allow people to be remembered how they want to be remembered, kind of.
Absolutely. Capturing that person in the moment of time.
Yeah. Or, like, you know, you get to sort of shape how other people remember someone that you loved. From this, we do get the main character, his father, actually sort of apologizing to him, being like, you know what, your mother, like, she really pressured you into making that movie of her, and she made you redo everything so many times. And we get this sort of memory that the father has of, like, the last thing that she said about her son was, like, God, he always was so useless because he couldn't come into the hospital. And
she wasn't this perfect person that was shown in this film.
The dad was like, you know, she never was, like, a super great mother to you, but I'm so glad that you showed her as such a wonderful mother in your movie. And it's, like, because he had shown how his mother is to him, like, and how he feels about her, his love for her, is shaped by the moments that he chose to capture, you know? Like, because he chose to capture these moments of love and joy and connection between them, that's the impression that people watching that movie walk away with, even though it's not the whole truth of the situation. So from this point, we fast forward to our main character in adulthood. And he has found a different woman who he's married and had children with. Never really been able to recapture that movie magic that he had with the film that he made about Eri. But in the end, he ends up going back to where the little hangout where Eri would show him all of her movies. And he's much older by this point. It's been a couple decades. But he walks into that room, and who should he find but Eri? Looking exactly as she did when he was in high school. And she says, you know, you failed to include a touch of fantasy in your movie because actually I am a vampire, so that was rude.
Jokes on you.
But she says, the way that my vampirism works is that I did die, on that day. But 3 days later, I was revived. And that's what happens every time I die. I just wake up a few days later with no memories of my previous life. But this time I didn't feel depressed, and I didn't feel like I didn't understand who I was, because I had your movie. And you captured me so beautifully that it helped me to, like, form who I am this time, essentially. And she expresses gratitude for that. And then, you know, they share that nice little moment. He leaves the building, and it explodes behind him. And then it ends.
It ends. It ends with an explosion, as it should have. As it began. Full circle. We started with an explosion. We end with an explosion. Every film should end with an explosion.
So the whole thing, as it turns out, has been a movie from beginning to end. And he managed to include his touch of fantasy right there at the very end. So, and I also like that element of him including a big stupid explosion in his record of his mother's death, because it's very clearly, like, his way of reconciling with that grief that overwhelmed him in that moment, and he wasn't able to go in the hospital. You know, he is coping for the pain that he feels over losing his mother by including this cheesy ending. And nobody else in his life seems to see that. And to me, that feels like, I don't know, it kind of ties into, like, Fujimoto's work as a whole, where it's like a lot of people are quick to dismiss it because it's cheesy and schlocky and edgy, purposefully shocking in its content. And yet, if you actually read his work, it is often just heart-achingly sincere.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, it ties back to that idea of people maybe not always making the right choice, but are in such a situation that they're just trying to survive through it. And grief is really intrinsically tied with that in a lot of Fujimoto's works. And how you react and act in response to losing somebody who's very, very important to you. You're not going to always make the most logical and correct decisions, or you're not going to always deal with that in a way that is, like, quote unquote suitable to other people. That's not how the grieving process works.
Yep. So this is such, again, just like Look Back, it's a beautiful portrait of these two people and their relationship with each other over years. And such a beautiful love letter to film and what it and what it can express, and what it can mean to people. This is about 200 pages long, and much like Look Back, I think it's a very masterful work. No notes, really. I think Eri is a great character as well. Who could have been very manic pixie dream girl. She could have been very, like, the blonde chick from Your Lie in April crossed my mind. Yeah. Who's, like, the most textbook manic pixie dream girl who dies to motivate a man. But I feel like,
fair, with any Fujimoto work, even if it was just Kaori from Your Lie in April, she'd still be a little bit, little bit of just a weirdo. I don't. He can't create just a normal character. That's not how it works.
But I thought Eri had a lot of depth to her. I thought their relationship with each other had a lot of depth to it, and that twist at the end is, like, just ties into everything really beautifully, while also just being like a kind of moment. So yeah, I really like Goodbye Eri.
It's also, I think, again, not to like keep bringing back the aspect of where each work sits within Fujimoto's like body of work. But I think it's sort of a testament to, because as said, Look Back is a masterpiece. And so when Goodbye Eri, his next one shot or next like big chapter before, because Chainsaw Man had ended, it was on, or well, ended the first part of it, it was on break. That's when these two were written and released in the interim between part 1 and part 2 of Chainsaw Man. I think there was perhaps an apprehension in readers as to how you could follow up something so masterfully done with a Look Back, and whether or not it was just kind of you'd struck gold accidentally versus purposefully having something really powerful to share. And it was really, maybe exciting isn't the right word, but following Look Back, which is a masterwork, with Goodbye Eri, which is not like as, I mean, it's a Fujimoto work, both of them, but it's probably less approachable compared to sort of the universal struggle of struggles of the art, like artist versus art and friendship, and those aspects tied into to Look Back with Goodbye Eri, and how it's slightly more obtuse. It's certainly a little bit more quirky in the way that Fujimoto loves to be. But seeing how well received it was, and that it wasn't just this is a weird guy who did one really amazing thing. It's this is a weird guy who makes really amazing things actually quite often, and he keeps getting better with his amazing things.
Yep. So do we want to go back in time now with our final sort of Fujimoto work?
Absolutely.
Which is...
And it this actually relates to one of our questions as well from Mango Man. If you've read the short story collections, which one stood out the most to you? And then there's a secondary question there with what devil would you be interested in to see in Chainsaw Man? But I think that first one ties or segues very well into talking about the short story collections.
Yep. So this is short story, two volumes of short story anthologies, of collecting his short stories, his one shots from before Chainsaw Man, which is what it's called, before Chainsaw Man. I found quite a few of these to be interesting. I found a couple of them to be duds, which is, I think, pretty normal
Standard.
For a short story collection, especially one that's like early work from a creator. But I would say more than were duds were ones that I thought were interesting. So the very first one in this collection is called A Couple Clucking Chickens Were Still Kicking in the Schoolyard, which I'm seeing on Wikipedia actually has a very famous Japanese tongue twister in the title, which is Niwa 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 Tori ga iru ita. The tongue twister is Niwa 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 Tori ga iru, which just means there were two chickens in the garden. So sorry, that's just cute. But this is like, this one is after aliens who eat humans, think human flesh is absolutely the most delicious thing in the world, have taken over Earth and have rendered humanity extinct. They think it's extinct because they have eaten all of the humans. But within the high school where the short story takes place, there are two chickens who very mysteriously don't look like chickens at all. They've got certainly chicken costumes on, but they look an awful lot like humans. But it turns out that the aliens don't actually really know what chickens look like, and they think chickens are disgusting. They don't eat chickens. So, some vestiges of the human race have gone to this chicken coop in this school to try and escape detection from the aliens and being eaten by the aliens. The older one is a boy whose face is completely obscured by his chicken mask, and he is very attached to the younger human girl who he seems very determined to protect from getting eaten. So this short story, I don't know that I want to spoil it, but it does have a very Fujimoto twist to it. And even though the art here is quite a bit rougher than anything else, so you can tell it's quite an early story, I think it's quirky in a way that I really enjoyed. And it's got a certain Gintama energy, but with, flesh-devouring aliens. And so I appreciated it. I liked this story.
It's a fun one. It's also like a perfect little encapsulation of that quirkiness we're talking about. There's and it does a lot in the 20-ish pages that it has.
Yeah, this one's super short.
It's a fun one.
The next one we have is Sasaki Stopped a Bullet. This one, I don't like how the female teacher is treated in this story. I don't like how she's an object of being lusted after by this high school boy, and I don't like that a random axe murderer shows up to rape her. And I don't think the cute little twist with him ending up on the moon at the end really saved that impression that I had that soured me. So this one's a bit of a dud for me. I don't know about you.
I honestly don't even remember it, so that's probably testament to that.
Next is Love is Blind. I'm trying to remember what this one is. This is the one where the boy is struggling with all of his heart to confess to the girl that he likes.
And then weird, crazy shit just keeps happening, like the world.
Like increasingly crazy shit keeps happening, and every time he's like, "That's not my priority right now. I have to say this to this girl. This is the day that determines the rest of my life." And it's like an alien come down to destroy the world, and he's like, "No, not yet."
Not right now.
There's another axe murderer in this one.
Always axe murderers. We just gotta assume there will be an axe murderer.
As you can tell from the fact that I couldn't remember what the story was, even though I just read this short story collection yesterday, from the title, it's not super memorable to me, but it is cute. It's cute. It's got a good comedic escalation. Shikaku I do remember because this story has a vampire in it. And an assassin. This is just the sweet, fucked up love story of a murder-obsessed assassin and an immortal vampire who just wishes he could die. And it's very Fujimoto, and it's cute. Cute. They end up very domestic together by the end of it. Mermaid Rhapsody is, in my opinion, kind of a dud. It's just boring. And at the end of this one, notably, there's a note from Fujimoto that says, I wrote this story because Jump SQ said that Tatsuki Fujimoto can't write a normal story. So I wrote a normal story.
It's not like inherently normal story, but it also just proves that, like, man, normal Fujimoto is just boring Fujimoto. Just give me his random weird shit. That's why we come. Don't give us normal. It's not why we're here.
Yeah. Next we have Woke Up as a Girl Syndrome, which was maybe the biggest dud in the collection for me. Just like super like gender essentialist, heteronormative stuff that honestly is not something that I expect from Fujimoto, so I guess he's probably grown as a person in his understanding of the world.
That really is reflective of, like, maybe initially having an interest in telling that kind of story, but not actually having any understanding of the nuances there. And I guess, quote unquote, doing his best insofar as, like, I'm sure he meant well, but I don't know that, as you said, there's a lot of issues with there. And thankfully, I think, having read later works, he's looked at that and challenged what is more of, like, what isn't done well in that short story. I think it's just an indication of, like, having an idea or an interest in telling a story about gender, but not, like, actually knowing how to do that in a whole way. And unlike some people who'd be like, yes, I got it perfect the first time, obviously you're still interested in telling that sort of story and kept trying to do that aspect better, which I would say he does do in majority of his works. So again, just I agree that it's like, this is rough, but also, like, well, it's also rough because it's probably, from a much younger Fujimoto that didn't really know what he was doing.
Yeah, he's gotten better. It's just, as a short story, it's not really worth reading, I think. Whereas a lot of the other ones in this collection I do consider worth reading, so. Such as the last two, which I think both of these are actually very good. The first one is the weirder one, which is Naita of the Prophecy. This one has an author note at the end, where Fujimoto says, Jump SQ was saying that Tatsuki Fujimoto can't write an unconventional character, so I wrote a story about an unconventional character. And Naita is definitely that.
Yes.
She's like an antichrist. She's like this girl of prophecy born with horns who thinks only of death. And she's, fated to bring the world to ruin. So the whole world just, like, wants her dead, but her big brother is like, no, I'm going to protect her, because even though I don't understand her, I can't understand her because, like, her manner of speaking is just violent words. It's like a soup of violent words. Like, she goes, cloudy darkness, blizzard, slaughter, decapitation, guts. Just completely deadpan. She also, like, kills and eats all of the animals that she finds around her, like, increasingly large numbers of animals, and animals that are increasingly large. So there's she's a very off-putting child for sure. Demon horns notwithstanding.
Yeah, but regardless, her brother loves her just the same.
And this is a story about him sort of struggling to be able to love her unconditionally when he doesn't feel like he can understand her. And then ultimately coming to a point where he does understand her just a little bit. And there's, you know, an apocalypse in there too. Yeah, this one's I found to be just the right mix of nutty and sweet and quirky. Really good short story, I think. Very Fujimoto. I don't think anyone else could write this.
No, no.
Any other thoughts on that one?
No. I think it. I don't know what it says about the editor being like, you can't write a unconventional character. It's like, have you read any of his work? What are you talking about?
Yeah, but I mean, he sure showed them.
Well, that's what I said. I'm like, I think Fujimoto heard that statement, took it as a challenge, and then decided to go for the Olympic gold. It's just, yeah, man.
And then the last story here is called Sisters. And this is a prototype for what later became Look Back. And it is about the relationship between two, an older sister and a younger sister who are both at art school in the fine arts program. It's about figure drawing. Their fine arts program, I guess the winner of like the best piece for the semester or something like that ends up being displayed in the school building at the beginning of the following semester. So the story starts with the younger sister having won that, and with a piece that is a naked figure drawing of her older sister. So the older sister has to deal with her naked ass body, drawn by her little sister up in front of the whole school.
Yeah.
They're like, wow, are your nipples really that pink? Just like, oh my god, why would you do this to me? And leave it to Fujimoto, who literally wrote a story that ends with incestuous sex between a brother and sister, to make a story about two sisters drawing each other naked and making it not actually nearly as weird as it could have been. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Basically, the older sister is like, you've ruined my life, my reputation. Why do you always do this? She's always been a better artist than me. Anything that I succeed in doing, she immediately, like, she copies me, and then she ends up doing it better. But the younger sister, for her part, chose to make this beautiful piece of her sister because she really looks up to her and wants to be just like her. The older sister goes on to be like, you know what? You have no idea what I look like naked. If there's anyone who knows how to draw myself naked, it's gonna be fucking me. And so she paints herself naked and wins the first prize for that painting. So her younger sister's painting is replaced by hers the following semester. And it's sort of like the younger sister's painting of her is very like idealized, you know, sexy like woman on a bed kind of classical drawing of a woman. But the older sister paints herself as she actually is, with, you know, not really a whole lot of a figure, and sitting very powerfully in a chair with her legs spread apart and her, like, you know, this strong stance. So there's also a commentary there about how women are portrayed in fine art. how the artistic nude shows up. That's fun. And it just kind of ends with the older sister being like, you know what? You're really talented. You're my younger sister. You're never gonna, you know, I still got it kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm proud of you, but, like, just remember, you're the younger sibling, which I think as older siblings, we can also, you and I, Ray, can appreciate, like, well, because there's a lot of instances where a younger sibling, man, I don't know where they get their talent from. They're just so good at shit. And you're like, God damn it. Why? Where the hell? But sometimes, as the older sibling, you gotta put them in their place a little bit. And it's like, don't you forget, I was born before
Well, but for
you.
the younger sister here, like, she never felt like she was better than her older sister at all. And her older sister's
of course
like,
not.
you know what? You still got a lot to learn. And it ends with the younger sister being like, yep.
I sure do.
With this really
and that's
sweet
the thing.
smile.
Where I'm not saying that. When I say, like, as older siblings, you see your younger sibling, you're like, man, they're just so fucking good at stuff, or like why are they so talented, so XYZ more than I ever was. But you actually talk to younger siblings 9 times out of 10, and they're just working so hard to feel like they measure up to their older siblings. And so, not that they necessarily ever admit that. I think in a sense, that's sort of the only unrealistic thing in this title, and where, like, the younger sister will actually says, oh yes, you know, all I've ever wanted is to be like you, type thing. It's like, nah, I don't know that's an accurate portrayal, but. As for the actual feeling behind that, yes, absolutely. That is 100%. And I think anyone with siblings would understand that dynamic.
Yeah, so I enjoyed this one. I think it's a very strong short story that was expanded on and improved in Look Back. So, strong way to end the collection. So... For me, looking at the list of stories...
It's about 50-50.
Yeah. The ones that stick out the most to me are the last 2 and the very first one. Yep. And I also like Shikaku a lot. So... Yep. For the ones that stood out to me, those are the ones.
I would agree. I mean, it's as you said, it's always kind of a crapshoot when you do get short story collections, especially when they're, like, from a mangaka prior to their, like, smash hit, you know, big success story. When they're just kind of throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. So, yeah, you can get really good stuff. You can get not so good stuff. And honestly, like, 50% pass rate is pretty good. Pretty good for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, good job, Fujimoto.
Good job. I wasn't horribly offended by any of them. Even the one that did not treat the teacher how I think she should have been treated.
Yeah. And I also think that, as said, the weaker ones, or the duds in this collection, one of them is just like, oh, well, I was told to make a normal character. And so, okay, well, that was sort of the inevitability. Or, like, following something, trying something that just didn't work, which is all part of the artistic process. You have to find the failure to find the success as well. Not everything's gonna be a winner. People weren't born and just create their magnum opus. They gotta mess around with some uninteresting and messy ideas before they find something cool and interesting and exciting. that people want to read. So I think it's just like I agree with the ones that you've said are the standouts. I think it just the collection itself is a reflection of the creative, like any creative, just trying to see what works and see what doesn't.
So to finish out, I haven't read Chainsaw Man, but would you like to quickly answer our final question, which is about Chainsaw Man?
Well, there's a secondary question that I said before. We do have one other question, but I do think that it ties back into what we've been saying a lot with this podcast anyway. But Mango Man, second question was, what devil would you be interested to see in Chainsaw Man? A little bit of context for that is that Chainsaw Man is set in this world where there are devils. And all of them kind of have a gimmick which like exists in the real world. So there's like the zombie devil, Power is a blood devil. There's like anything that you can think of. The gun devil is a big villain within the first part of the story. So any kind of like idea that exists can be a devil, but then they're all just trying to eat humans. So there's a big bat devil, there's the idea of like the war devil, there's all sorts of things. So that's what devil would you be interested to see in Chainsaw Man? Because they all have like really weird funky designs as well, which are usually pretty cool.
No idea. You go first.
So if we're talking about like, and I'm coming from this as someone who has read all of part 1, I've read some of part 2, I'm not caught up with it. I would be interested in seeing a devil more related to like a natural disaster, like the earthquake devil, or notably what I was thinking of is like a tsunami devil, which I know are like, both of those things are a little bit for Japan, like maybe we don't write about those in manga too much. But considering I understand the function of devils in this world, and then also the relationship with Chainsaw Man, and like why Chainsaw Man is important in this world, it would be interesting to see a natural disaster devil, because that has that very often can have the same kind of terrible destruction in the same way that the gun devil, quote unquote, or the war devil has, but without that human aspect to it. It's something that humanity doesn't have control over in the same way that we do war or, whatever. So I would be interested in seeing, well, you can insert like any kind of natural disaster in there that doesn't, I don't know why the two that came to mind are things that are very pertinent to Japan specifically. Maybe it's just my subconscious doing something there. But
maybe it's just because you're a weeb. Gee.
Maybe. I don't know. But like whether it's forest fires, whether it's, typhoon or a hurricane, whatever you want to call it. Like I think that idea could be done very interestingly. And it would be interesting to see the I guess subsequent reaction to that after within the world of Chainsaw Man because of how that functions. So that is my answer.
As someone who has no idea how devils function within Chainsaw Man because I've read 10 chapters of it, I don't know, man. I've been really into the band Ghost lately, which is like...
I know that band. because I know somebody who is also very into that band.
Which is like, what if a satanic cult, the way that like Catholics envision Satanists to be, so not like how actual Satanists are, which is mostly just like atheists. If a satanic cult, as Catholics envision Satanists, took over the world to the extent that the Catholic Church has, and had a papacy with an anti-pope in charge. So, let's make an organized religion devil. That'd be fun.
The church devil.
Church devil. And he, like, throws crosses at people? I don't know.
Oh, pretty good. I'd read that. And I guess
I think Fujimoto would do it justice, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess this kind of ties somewhat well with our final question, which is Apollo Gray sent in, why do you think Fujimoto's manga are so incredibly well received, despite at times being extremely hard to consume? What makes people enjoy that, you think? I don't know. People just like weird stuff. I also don't think it's, as I've said a little bit earlier in the podcast, I think Fujimoto reflects something very true in human nature and relationships and interaction that isn't very often captured in manga just generally, because of how poisoned it is with tropes and typical slop, quote unquote anime bullshit. I think there's an understanding of nuance and the messiness of morality and his characters not having to be this perfect hero to be understandable and to be sympathetic, empathetic. It makes people can recognize that and appreciate that. It's all great fun and games and great to read about perfect heroes and who've never made a bad decision in their life, but it's also boring. You couldn't enjoy that for too long. And so I think there's a relatability there. I think he also just is able to, as discussed earlier, even though these characters are morally grey and are not perfect people, there's always an understanding as to why they make the decisions that they do. Even if they're stupid and like not logical decisions, there's always a rationale behind it. Characters aren't doing dumb shit just to do dumb shit or just to lead the plot along. It's a reaction to who they are and the environment that they're existing in, which I think also is just something that you don't see a lot of. And even like, I think his works, especially the early parts of his works, including Chainsaw Man, are a pretty good litmus test, because I would argue that a lot of the shock and gore and just bizarre bullshit that happens, he front ends a lot of that stuff. So there's a lot of like in Fire Punch, there's cannibalism and incest and bestiality and all of these things right off the bat. So like, if you're not cool with that, then this is not a series for you. Arguably, Chainsaw Man is not as in your face, but still has like the main character dying a very gruesome death. He's also, fairly age appropriately pervy. There's gore and all sorts of hyper violence. And again,
well, I mean, it comes down to like, do you hear the premise of like, this guy turns into a chainsaw and beats up devils and go, awesome? Or do you go, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life?
Exactly. It's the same thing as like expecting an Oscar-worthy performances from like Sharknado. That's not what that is. It's not what the function of that movie is meant to be. It's meant to be dumb fun, and there might be some pathos in there, but you shouldn't be expecting a series like Fire Punch or Chainsaw Man to be anything. Well, no, that's not correct. But I don't think that if you're going into those series not expecting some wild, bizarre stuff off the bat, then you're kind of misreading what that series is projecting. Like,
well, I think he's very clear about his influences and like what kind of aesthetic he's going for in his work. And I think if you're not into that aesthetic, you'll realize that pretty quickly. You're reading his work, and you'll be like, yeah, not for me. You know, he's not out here trying to lie to you.
Exactly. And I would argue that despite all of what, like, a title like Chainsaw Man and the premise like Chainsaw Man presents itself as, if you can get through that just crazy amount of wild, off the wall, bizarre, fun silliness, which can be a little bit in your face and confronting. He certainly likes to be very edgy at times. Then it does pay off. Like, you do get the pathos of later in that story. It's not just dumb popcorn movie, like, action fun. There is stuff going on. So that's why I think it is well received, because people expect the dumb, silly Sharknado style of story, and then they get that, and they get that in spades, but then they also get like a really beautifully nuanced look at like people's relationships with each other, and that's appreciated because, you know, we're all silly humans. We all do dumb shit. We all like have our weird things that we like, and that
it's sort of elevating that B-movie genre to an extent. Sort of like Mad Max Fury Road did for the same genre. Just kind of bringing more to the table within that genre than people expect to be brought to the table. Which I think is a good thing. You know, it's cool when people want to, like, make art based on the art that they enjoy. And they put their whole hearts into it, you know? And for me, like, that's, I think, the charm of Fujimoto's work. Is that, like, within anime, I was thinking specifically of, like, RRR, which is a Bollywood movie, well, Tollywood.
Oh, yeah.
That, became really popular, like, worldwide. And I've been thinking about it a lot because Takarazuka did an adaptation. And because RRR is very popular in Japan. Because it's yaoi. I mean, what? But, and I feel like part of what makes it popular with, say, like, a crowd, at least in, like, if I'm thinking of, like, America, right? Where most of people's exposure to movies, unless they're, like, a cinema buff, is going to be, like, Hollywood stuff. And that stuff is so irony poisoned these days. And watching RRR ends up being nice and refreshing because it's got a lot of the same action tropes, but it plays them completely straight. You know, a guy punches a tiger and it's super serious. Like, it's wearing its heart on its sleeve, and I feel like Fujimoto does the same thing within, like, shonen manga, seinen manga, that often is also, right now, in this, you know, current, set of tropes that we see a lot, pretty irony poisoned. There's a lot of, like, you know, the main character of this is, like, has been reincarnated from the real world where he was, you know, this, like, cynical, like
Schlubby
Kyon,
loser. Yeah.
Haruhi Suzumiya, kind of, like, can't fucking take anything seriously because he's, you know, knows what's gonna happen because he knows all of the game tropes in this world. And he's here to game the system. And it's annoying. It's annoying. Like, it's like, can't we
it's
just...
It's easy to hate that guy. Can't you just be sincere about one thing?
Yeah. Can't we just, like, feel our feelings here, man? And Fujimoto's in here with, like, a chainsaw on each arm and on his head. Like, yes, we can just feel our feelings, and it can be awesome.
The amount of joy that Denji gets from kicking a guy in the balls is just like that, truly, like, amazing, and also exactly how a 16-year-old would be, right? It's just, I don't know. There's a sincerity to it.
I think that you wouldn't go into a series called Chainsaw Man expecting it to be, like, sincere. You would expect it to be, like, a Birdemic or Sharknado type of, like, you know, we know we're making a terrible movie kind of thing. But then, you know, it comes at you with its heart on its sleeve, and you end up crying before you even realize what's going on. And that's, I think, something that resonates with people. Especially when it's something that a lot of the other, like, popular series within its demographic and its genre aren't necessarily doing. So, that's Fujimoto.
That is Fujimoto.
And a lot of his successors have taken after him in the regard of just kind of, you know, saying fuck it to convention and making what they want to make, which is also just great to see. It's made a generation of really good Shonen Jump stuff.
And, yeah, just show stuff from either Jump or Jump adjacent works. For you and me, right, you know, obviously we are not the target audience for Jump, but there's been so much fun shonen coming out. There's been a lot of crap, but the amount of, like, quirky, weird stuff that we've both enjoyed from this new generation, and a lot of them have been people who've worked with Fujimoto in the past as assistants. It's just... It's so exciting and fun to see.
So, because our podcast for July ended up being August part 1, we are actually recording our next episode next weekend, 2 weeks?
I would say probably 2 weeks, just to give me some time to edit this one, and also get questions from people and such. But next month we are talking about pet manga.
And by next month we mean this month.
Yes, that's next episode. We are doing pet manga. The official August episode is pet manga, where we are talking about manga featuring pets. Cats, dogs, I don't know, budgerigars, whatever else there is out there. We will read it and talk about it. So... Yep.
There it is. Pet manga.
And there's been a large influx of it recently. A lot of manga about cat owners. A couple manga about dog owners, which is nice as a former dog owner. And also just some of the, like, I don't know. I'm sure there's some others around there as well. But be sure to send in your questions. As always, we do try to answer them to the best of our ability. And if you are wanting to send in a question, you can do so either in the comments of the YouTube version of this podcast, or you can send them or you can respond to the post that I put out every month on the social media site formerly known as Twitter. My handle is that's GEE_reads. Also, be sure to follow Ray on her social media. That's at Whimsical Pix. That's Whimsical PIX. All one word. You can follow this podcast either on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Simply G. Otherwise, you can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms, notably Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, I think Stitcher as well. There's not a lot around anymore, but we are on them, so you can listen to us there. If you enjoy this episode or the podcast in general, please consider leaving a review, a rating, one of those things. It means a lot. We appreciate it. And yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we go, Ray?
Nope, I think you covered it all.
Oh, thank goodness for that. So we'll catch you in the next episode, guys. Thanks for listening, and bye till then.
Bye, guys.